Hey everybody, welcome to another deep dive with us. Today, we're going to be looking at Martin Luther King Jr., kind of going beyond like the typical textbook
Hmm.
version to the things you hear every year around MLK Day. So we got some really interesting sources here. We've got excerpts from a biography about MLK. We've got a presidential proclamation by Barack Obama honoring him. And we've also got several articles about nonviolent movements throughout the war and throughout history, actually.
Yeah.
Really interesting to see how MLK's story kind of fits into this bigger picture. So to guide us through all this, I've got our expert here who's going to be helping us connect all the dots.
Yeah, it's really easy to think of these kind of iconic figures like MLK as standing alone. But their work always, it builds on what came before and influences what comes after. So there's always this continuous historical conversation happening.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it as a historical conversation. So let's start unpacking this conversation by looking at MLK's childhood. His biography talks about Sweet Auburn. This was the vibrant center of Black Atlanta where he grew up. And it was a successful community, but also deeply segregated. I mean, imagine being young MLK
Hmm.
and experiencing those two realities side by side.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that he wasn't born a symbol. He had a
Oops.
regular childhood,
Right
played
there.
baseball, riding bikes.
Yep.
um, but all of those ordinary experiences happened within this system of segregation.
Yes.
And that contrast between the potential that he saw in his community and the limitations imposed by racism really shaped his worldview from a young age.
Yeah, definitely. The biography also talks about his education. He went to Morehouse College,
Hmm.
Koser Theological Seminary, and then Boston University. And he also served as a pastor before stepping into his leadership role in the civil rights movement. So clearly he had this strong intellectual and spiritual foundation.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And, if you look deeper into his influences, you see figures like Thoreau and Gandhi who championed nonviolent resistance, and you can see their influence on him. And really, MLK didn't invent the idea of nonviolence, but he became like a master at applying it within the American context.
Yeah.
And you can see how his deep understanding of both theology and philosophy really comes through in his speeches and writings.
Right, and you can feel that depth when you read his work.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the Montgomery bus boycott. This is where MLK is really launched into the national spotlight.
Of the civil rights movement, right?
Yeah, the boycott lasted for over a year and really showed the world the power of organized nonviolent resistance and, MLK's unwavering commitment to
Yeah.
this principle, not just as a moral stance, but as a strategic one, was really key to their success.
Yeah, and the boycott wasn't just about buses, right? It was about challenging this entire system of segregation.
Yeah.
It galvanized African Americans all across the South and really forced the country to confront this issue of racial inequality. Yeah, it's true. One of the things that made MLK such a compelling leader was his ability to articulate the moral urgency of the movement while also understanding the practical steps needed to achieve change. He knew that nonviolent direct action could disrupt the status quo, expose the brutality of the opposition, and force those in power to negotiate.
Yeah, and during the boycott, his leadership really showed the world that nonviolence wasn't passive. It was actually a powerful force for change. And it wasn't just in Montgomery either. These tactics were successful in Birmingham and Selma too. It's almost like a domino effect, with each victory inspiring more people to join the movement.
Yeah, and it's interesting. MLK actually drew inspiration from nonviolent movements worldwide. He saw that this wasn't just an American struggle, but it was a global one. And he understood that by connecting with these broader movements, he could amplify the message of the civil rights movement and
Yeah,
build solidarity across borders.
absolutely. Yeah, it really is amazing how these ideas travel, like you said, across cultures and across time periods. It speaks to this like universal desire for justice and equality. And speaking of global movements, we've got this article called The Power of Nonviolent Action. And it really digs into just how effective these campaigns can be. It's got this like amazing statistic. It says that nonviolent campaigns are actually twice as likely to succeed as violent ones, especially when fighting for freedom and self-determination.
Wow, that's powerful. It's like a reminder that choosing the path of nonviolence isn't just about taking the moral high ground. It's actually about being strategically smart.
So why do you think nonviolent movements are so effective?
Well, there are a lot of reasons. Firstly, you have to think about the human and economic costs of violent uprisings. It's just a heavy price to pay, with lasting consequences for communities and sometimes entire nations.
That's true. War and violence leave scars that can take generations to heal.
Exactly. And nonviolent action. While it's not without risks, of course, It offers a way to challenge injustice without perpetuating that cycle of violence. It allows people to resist oppression without resorting to the same tactics as their oppressors.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And the article also mentions how nonviolent action can actually win over people who might be on the fence.
Yeah.
And it can even like create divisions within those in power. How does that work?
Well, it's about shifting perceptions, right? It's
Right.
about exposing the true nature of the regime. When you resist oppression peacefully, you kind of force the oppressors to react. And a lot of times their reactions
Yeah.
actually reveal their brutality and injustice to the world, and then it becomes much harder for them to justify their actions and to maintain support.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's like, I don't know, a moral judo flip.
Yeah.
You're using their own force against them.
Yeah, exactly. And the global media plays a huge role in this too. Images of peaceful protesters being met with violence can spark international outrage and put pressure on governments to change. Think about those iconic photos from the civil rights movement. The police dogs attacking protesters, the fire hoses being turned on peaceful marchers. Those images shocked the conscience of the nation and really helped to galvanize support for the movement.
Right. It's crazy how powerful those images can be.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that we live in an interconnected world, and what happens in one place can have ripple effects across the globe.
Yeah.
And that solidarity across borders can be a really powerful force for change. Speaking of connections, we've got this article called Nonviolent Thought Through U.S. History, and it traces the roots of nonviolent thinking in America, going all the way back to groups like the Anabaptists and the Quakers, and then through abolitionists like Frederick Douglass and writers like Henry David Thoreau, with his idea of civil disobedience.
Right. And it highlights how, MLK's work wasn't some radical departure. It was really part of this long tradition of American thinkers and activists who believed in the power of nonviolent resistance. And it wasn't just homegrown either. There was this fascinating cross-pollination of ideas with thinkers like Tolstoy and Gandhi, influencing American activists, and vice versa.
Wow, that's so interesting. It shows that these ideas about justice and equality can really transcend geographical boundaries and cultural
Yeah.
differences. They speak to something so fundamental about the human experience. But let's bring this conversation into the present day a little bit. We've got this other article called Harnessing the Power of Protest, and it talks about how new technologies are changing the landscape of activism.
It is fascinating to see how these timeless principles of nonviolence are finding new expression in the digital age, in this age of social media and instant communication.
Yeah. One of the examples that really struck me from the article was the story of a student walkout in Los Angeles. These thousands of teenagers, inspired by protests against immigration policies, managed to organize this massive demonstration in just 48 hours using MySpace and text messaging.
It just shows you how technology can dramatically lower the barriers to collective action. It allows movements to build momentum rapidly, respond to events in real time, and coordinate across vast distances. It's like having a megaphone that can reach millions of people instantly.
It really is. And it's not just about spreading the word either. Technology can also create this sense of shared awareness, like that feeling of being connected to a larger movement.
Absolutely. Social media can give a voice to those who feel marginalized or voiceless. It creates a sense of solidarity and really empowers people to speak out and demand change. But we have to remember, technology itself doesn't create change. It's a tool. And like any tool, it can be used for good or bad.
That's true. You still need the strategy, the organization, the commitment to nonviolent principles. The article brings up the example of Alaa Abdel Fattah. He was an Egyptian activist and programmer who was arrested in Cairo. But get this, while in custody, he actually managed to use Twitter to document his arrest and coordinate with other activists on the outside.
That's incredible. It's a remarkable example of how technology can be a tool of resistance. By using Twitter to broadcast his situation to the world, Abdel Fattah was able to rally support and put pressure on the authorities.
And it worked. Twitter's real-time updates and group messaging actually helped tip the balance in their favor and ultimately led to his release. It shows how technology can be such a powerful tool for challenging injustice, even when facing what seem like insurmountable obstacles.
Yeah, it highlights how these movements are evolving and adapting to the digital age. The principles of nonviolent resistance remain the same, but the tools and tactics are constantly changing.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from MLK's roots in Atlanta to global nonviolent movements, and even Twitter-powered protests. It's amazing to see how it's all connected.
It's true. It's a good reminder that MLK's legacy isn't just about one man or one movement. It's part of this global tapestry of nonviolent struggle that spans centuries and continents. And it's still unfolding today, Those same principles that fueled the civil rights movement are now being used by activists all around the world to fight for a whole range of issues, from climate change to economic inequality to LGBTQ plus rights.
It's really inspiring to see how that legacy continues to evolve and adapt to new challenges.
Yeah.
It really does. It makes you
Yeah.
kind of stop and think, like, where do I fit into all of this?
Yeah.
How can we each like contribute to creating a world that's more, aligned with MLK's vision?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question we should all be grappling with. And it's not necessarily about, grand gestures or anything, but it's about the daily choices we make, to act with courage,
Yeah.
to show compassion, to be committed to justice in whatever ways we can.
Yeah, I like that. Recognizing that we all have the power to make a difference, even if it seems small.
Exactly. And that we're not alone in this. We're part of this incredibly long and powerful legacy
Yeah.
of people who have believed in and fought for a better world. And we can continue to build upon that.
This deep dive has been so eye-opening. It feels like we've just begun to explore this topic.
And that's the beauty of learning, isn't it? It's not about finding all the answers. It's about sparking curiosity, igniting passion, and empowering each of us to keep exploring and keep pushing for change.
Absolutely. So we've talked a lot about the positive potential of technology,
Yeah.
but I'm also thinking about the potential downsides. What about those?
That's a crucial question. How do we ensure that these tools are being used ethically? How do we prevent the spread of misinformation? The manipulation of people online, all the harassment that can happen.
And how do we create a digital space where people can actually have,
Mm.
like genuine conversations and understanding, even when there's disagreement? These are really important challenges as we navigate this new landscape of activism.
Yeah, for sure. It's not enough to just embrace the technology. We have to engage with it thoughtfully and critically. We need to understand its potential, but also its limitations.
Right? It's like we've been given this incredibly powerful tool, but we're still figuring out how to use it responsibly.
Exactly. That learning process is ongoing. It requires us to be reflective,
Hmm.
to be willing to adapt, and to learn from our mistakes. We have to be vigilant about how technology can be used to divide us, to distract us, to disempower us.
But at the same time, we need to embrace its power to connect us, to inspire us, to mobilize us around shared values and a common purpose.
Exactly. The future of nonviolent action is being shaped right now, and we all have a role to play in shaping it.
It's up to each of us to ensure that technology is a force for good in the world,
Hmm.
a tool for building a more just and peaceful world.
And that starts with the choices we make every day. What we choose to amplify, what we choose to challenge, how we choose to engage with the world around us.
I like that. Recognizing that we're not just passive consumers of information, we're active participants in shaping the narrative, in shaping the future.
And that's an incredibly empowering thing to realize. It means that each of us has the ability to contribute to this legacy of nonviolent action in our own unique way.
So we can be the ones who carry that torch forward, who inspire the next generation of activists and changemakers.
And who knows what amazing things they'll accomplish with that inspiration.
This deep dive has been truly inspiring, but it feels like we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to learn, so much more to explore.
And that's the beauty of it, right? The journey never really ends. There's always another layer to uncover, another perspective to consider, another connection to make.
So to everyone listening, we encourage you to keep diving deep, keep questioning, keep connecting the dots.
And as you do, remember Dr. King's words, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice.
Let's be the ones who help to bend that arc, who work tirelessly to make that vision a reality.
And let's do it together with courage, compassion, and an unwavering commitment to building a world where everyone can thrive.
Thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope this deep dive has sparked your curiosity, ignited your passion, and left you feeling empowered.
Remember, the fight for justice continues.
Let's be the ones to carry the torch forward. Let's make MLK's dream a reality.
Until next time, keep diving deep, keep questioning, and keep striving for a more just and equitable world.